it off.
Thank you, Michelle. And tonight, our main speaker is Drew.
Hi, I'm Drew, and I'm a real alcoholic. Congratulations to the young lady who has 70 days of sobriety. I can remember when I got to AA, 70 days of sobriety felt like impossible. There's no way that could happen. And congratulations to the chip takers tonight also. And thank you for having me here tonight. I'm very grateful to get a chance to be to this meeting. This is my first time here. I love the meeting, the name of the meeting, The Fourth Dimension. It talks about in the big book how we've seen much of heaven on earth and we've been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence. And that line really caught my eye when I was reading the big book. I said, man, that sounds what I want, you know. And I call myself a real alcoholic because it does talk in the big book about the different types of alcoholics. And the fourth type, they talk about the real alcoholic. And that's the one that has really progressed in his disease. And basically, although...
Get in there, Drew, don't be shy.
I don't know what to do with my hands. That type of alcoholic, basically, once they start drinking, the switch is flipped. They can become from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde in an instant. And although they are very capable in all other areas of life, they seem to do well once the alcohol is added to the equation and things just go downhill. They do absurd things, you know, and who knows what's going to happen. And sometimes nothing happens too bad, and sometimes something really bad happens. But you just never know what's going to happen. It's a roll of the dice every time. When I got sober for about a year, I went to visit a friend of my mom. She's a real Christian lady, and my mom had passed away. And I went to visit her in Virginia, where I'm from, and we had lunch. And I was explaining to her, you know, about my alcoholism and how I was recovering from it and what a great life I was having. And she's told me, she said, well, you know, Linda's husband, Rich, he's an alcoholic too, but he can drink a few beers every now and then. On special occasions, he's allowed to have a few beers. And she says, are you allowed to have a few beers, Henny? I said, no. I can never safely drink again. I'm a no matter what, or no matter how good things are, or no matter how bad things are, a drink or a drug is never going to make it better, no matter what. And I said, I'm a real alcoholic. I don't know what kind of alcoholic Rich is, but I know I'm a real alcoholic. And I've accepted that. And I loved being sober. It's awesome. Amen. I had no idea how my life would be without alcohol in it, because my entire life, alcohol was involved in my entire life, from the time I was a young teenager until I finally got sober. And I was able to quit drinking for periods of time. You know, it talks about in the big book how there's two ways you can tell if you're an alcoholic. One, you can't stop the drink, you have to have the drink every day. And then there's also one called the periodic drinker, which is a person that can stop drinking for periods of time, but once they have a drink, they can't stop until they get drunk. And that was me for a long time. I was able, but, you know, once I had the drink, I was getting blotto. You know, I was in a race. There was no social drinking for me. There was no sense in having one drink or two drinks. That just didn't make sense to me. And I started at a young age. I was a big kid. When I was 15, my friend was a computer hacker. So he hacked into the Iowa Department of Motor Vehicles, and he printed me a real license from Iowa. And it was a genuine license. I was Greg Elms until I turned, from the time I was 15 to 21. And I could go buy liquor and beer and wine, and we didn't drink much wine back then, but anywhere I wanted to, in the restaurants and in the grocery stores and the liquor store. So I had a lot of access to alcohol at an early age, and I drank a lot, and I had a lot of fun. You know, when I listen to people's stories, a lot of times they say they drank because they didn't fit in, they weren't, you know, it made them feel a lot better socially. I didn't really have that problem growing up. I actually fit in very well. I was really good at athletics. I was really good at academics. I was really good I had lots of friends. My family were Christian people that didn't drink. My mom had warned me that my grandfather was an alcoholic, but I said, I'm sure my great self will be able to control my drinking, But I didn't have anything that I was drinking over. But what I found out later was that alcohol was the solution to all the problems I didn't know I had. And it took a lot of breaking down. It took a lot of years of drinking for me to start figuring that out. That alcohol was my number one problem, but my thinking was my overall problem. The bottles were a symptom of my thinking. So I partied a lot. I had a lot of fun. I went to college. Once I moved out of my parents' house and went to college when I was 18, all bets are off. I could drink whenever I wanted to, every night. For years and years I drank. I would get up in the morning and I was relatively unfazed, and I would go to my classes and go to work and then go out and party all night again, and I would wash, rinse, and repeat. And it added a couple of years to my college. I was on a 6-year plan instead of a 4-year plan. But, I had to drop some early classes. But overall, it didn't affect me too terribly. It didn't have too many consequences. But as I got older, I started getting in a little bit of trouble with the law. I had a DUI. I had many recklesses that were, a DUI was a reduced reckless. I had a lot of times that I was let off that I should have had DUIs. I could probably have a handful of them. Had it not been for cops that said, sit here on the curb and for an hour and I come back and you're gone, I'm going to go find you. And, and then go home. They don't do that much stuff like that anymore these days. But I got a few things like that. I got a few breaks. But that still didn't, make me quit drinking. When I got the DUI, I decided to quit drinking because it was a lot of, hassle with all the stuff you got to do, all the money you got to pay. And I quit drinking for the 6 months, and man, my life got really better. Everything got better. My relationships got better. My physical fitness got better. My bank account got better. My work productivity got better. And then after I was done for 6 months, I thought, well, man, you've done such a great job here. And I patted myself on the back. I said, I think it's okay for you to have a couple drinks now. And then, of course, after a couple drinks became a lot of drinks in a short period of time. And every time I would quit for a period of time, I would start drinking again, and it would start getting worse faster than it did before. Because alcoholism is a progressive illness. And I didn't even know it was an illness. I just thought it was a lack of willpower. I thought, man, if I put my mind to it, and most of my life, anything I put my mind to, I was able to overcome it or conquer it or whatever, if I really wanted to. And as drinking went on, and I started having less of that that ability to do that. I started really not being able to quit for as long periods of time. I used to do a thing I call after New Year's Eve, I would get sober for a month in January, like a dry January. And after I'd give my liver a vacation because I drank every single night. I didn't take any nights off. It didn't matter how much I drank the night before, I still drink the next day. So after I did that for a couple years, and when I would do that, I would think, I got this still. I could still beat this, when I want to. But then as the years went on, the month went to 3 weeks, and then it went to 2 weeks, and then it went to 1 week, and then it went to none. Just kind of like meetings, if you're going to meetings 5 nights a week, and then all of a sudden you decide it's okay to go to 3 nights a week, and then all of a sudden before you know it, it's none. So I started drinking year round. And I didn't have too many problems with relationships because I never had real deep, serious relationships. I mostly had flings because I was a selfish and self-centered person, and I didn't want a relationship to get in the way of my drinking. So most of my drinking, we meet people from work I met or people I met at bars, and it was always a physical relationship first, and it was some cerebral, mental bit of it, and there was no spiritual. I had zero spiritual in my life. But, and the relationships were doomed to fail from the start, and they never lasted long. But, I figured that way I wasn't hurting too many people. I wasn't being the tornado going through people's lives. So I continued to drink through my 30s and my 40s, and I would go to work every day, and I sometimes would still be drunk from the night before, and I would sweat it all out, and I'd count down the hours so I could leave and go start drinking again at happy hour and do it all over again. And not much of a life. I sat around at the bar talking about all the things I was going to do with my life, all these places I was going to go, and I never did any of them because I never had no money. I spent all my money at the bar, bills and bar, that was it. I didn't have money for other things like that. But, when they say when you come to Alcoholics Anonymous that there's usually three things, the three L's. There's your liver, your lover, and your liberty. So my liberty was in danger. I'd gotten in some trouble with the law, again, another DUI, 20 years apart from this other one. And then my liver, too, man, I was feeling terrible. I couldn't even stand what I looked like in the mirror. When I looked at myself in the mirror, my hair felt weird, my teeth were fuzzy, I was getting in bad shape. I was really drinking. And I had experienced a few things kind of in random succession where first my father passed away, and then my dog passed away, and then my mom passed away, and then my brother passed away. So all in about 3.5 years this all happened, and I felt very sorry for myself, and I started to drink even more. And then I was able to actually inherit some money from my parents' estate, and then this gave me time to semi-retire and become a full-time drinker. So, before at least I was going to work from in the morning until the evening, and I didn't drink while I was at work. But this gave me the ability to drink from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. And I went through some really, really isolation, dark times, man, where I was just like, would go days. I would drink myself, I'd wake up and I'd drink myself back to sleep. It's the worst time of my life. It was so miserable. And I got to the point where I felt like I couldn't do anything. Every decision I made seemed like it turned out wrong. It was just like, I felt helpless. I used to be a fairly competent person, and all of a sudden I couldn't make the simple, basic decisions anymore. My brain was just going bad, from all the alcohol, all the abuse. So I needed help, but I didn't know what to do. My sister was really concerned about me. She lived up in Virginia, and I'm down in Florida. So she sent a friend of mine. My best friend's father was an alcoholic, and I'd seen him in his alcoholism before he passed. And she sent her friend, my friend Neil, down to try to do like a mini intervention, so to say. And he brought me some meetings that were close by. I live in Indian Rocks Beach, and I had lost my vehicle at this point. So he gave me something I could ride my bicycle to. So there was one meeting there. I said, okay, he made me promise to go to a meeting. So there's one there called, it was a men's group that met on Saturday at 8 o'clock. I said, okay, I'll try out the men's group. I would probably feel more comfortable being in the men's group since this is my first meeting. And I went there at 8 o'clock, and it's at the town hall in the park there, and all the doors were locked on the town hall, and all the lights were off. And I said, that's weird. I looked at it again, and then I looked over next door, and there was an art center, and it was all lit up, and there was cars all parked around it. And I said, well, the meeting must be over here. So I went over there, and I walked in, and they had a huge spread of like meatballs and charcuterie and a big sub, and I was like, wow, this doesn't look so bad, So I heard all the clamor from down the hall where the lights were. So I walked down the hall, and I walked in, and I don't know if you ever seen a movie where like you walk into a bar and all the music stops and everyone turns and looks at you. This is what happened here. And I looked, and there was about 25 little old ladies, and they had their sewing machines and their glitter guns, and they were sewing. And I said, this isn't the men's AA meeting for Indian Rocks. And they said, no, this is the senior women's arts and crafts clubs for Indian Rocks Beach. And they all started laughing. I said, I think I'm in the wrong place. And I left. And then when I got home, I looked at the thing again, the slip again, and it said the meeting was at 8 a.m., not 8 p.m. So that's how bad my brain was. So there was a meeting at the town hall the next morning, and I went to that meeting. I decided I'd go to that meeting instead. So I have this macaw. It's a blue and gold macaw. It's a big parrot. And sometimes I ride around the neighborhood with it on my shoulder while I ride my bike. So a lot of people see me in the neighborhood, like the guy with the parrot, the big guy with the big parrot. And I thought I would go to this meeting and I would kind of slip in and just check it out from the back row, see what it's about. And there's people standing out front. And as I parked my bike and I started walking in, one lady goes, "That's the guy with the parrot!" Like, so everybody turns and looks at me. And I'm like, "Hey, hi guys." So her name was Paula. So Paula figures into my story a little bit later. She embarrassed me a little bit. I went to the meeting, I sat in the back row, and people were talking about God. And I was really turned off about God because I grew up with religion. I saw a lot of hypocrites in the church that I went to. And I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about that, and I didn't want to have anything to do with that. And I said, "Oh man," and some of them seemed really crazy. And I was like, "I think this might be a cult." So I said, "Well, I said, I don't know if this is for me." So anyway, my sobriety date is April 27th, 2020. So the next week they shut down the meeting because of COVID. I got sober during COVID, if you can believe that. Most people said, "Man, we drank more during COVID." I said, "Why would you get sober then? That's the worst time possible." And I said, "Well, my journey, that's where it took me. That's when I needed to do it." So I was riding my bike around the neighborhood, and that lady, Paula, who I had pointed me out to everybody at the meeting before, saw me. I'd never run into her before in all the years I lived there. And she said, "Hey, the meetings are online now. You can go online." She gave me the address for it, and I went on a Zoom meeting. So I got sober on Zoom meetings. And I went on the meeting, and I was really going because I had violated probation, and I thought they were going to put me in jail. So I was hoping I could find someone at the meeting to say, "Hey, this guy's going to meetings now," and they'll write me a little letter. I can give it to the judge, maybe I'll get a little time off, And so I went on the meeting, I typed my entire name because I had never done a Zoom before, so I didn't know. And I didn't know it was Alcoholics Anonymous. So most people had their name and their last initial, or their name, first name only. But I just put my whole name. And I went on the meeting, and this one guy on there, man, his story really resonated with me. It was like, wow, that sounds a lot like what I've been going through. I really identified with what he was talking about. And I wanted to, after the meeting was over, I was like, let's see if I could talk to this guy. And then when the meeting's over, it was probably their first Zoom meeting too. They go to boop, and the screen is gone. And there's no way, I didn't know how to contact any of these people. So I said, "Oh, well, I'll just face the music, see what happens." And then later that week, I hadn't been working for a long time. And about 6 months before, that same friend that came down and gave me the AA meetings, he had given me some work to do for his company, doing like some data entry and some cold calling for new clients and stuff like that. He was an industrial manufacturing business. And I had an account through his business, and I hadn't used it for 6 months. But my friend Neil called me and said, "Hey, you remember that guy you were talking to in Philadelphia about the machine, the felt roofing machines?" And I'm like, yeah. He goes, "I can't find that guy's info. Can you go on your email and find that guy's info and forward it to me?" So I opened up my email, and that guy that had been talking at that meeting had found me on LinkedIn and emailed me. He said, "You want to change your life? All you got to do is follow a few simple rules and give me a call." And I was like, wow. And I said I did want to change my life because I got to the point of desperation. And I called him, and he became my sponsor, and he walked me through the steps. And I saw what a miracle that this guy would have done that, reached out like that. And what a miracle I would have looked at that email, because I haven't used my LinkedIn account or that business account for months and months. So I could see something was happening in my life immediately. I ran into that lady. I had the guy contact me, and I started seeing things changing as I got sober. So my first few weeks, I thought about drinking a lot. It was really tough. Thought about it all day. From the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. I got another job, so luckily I would stay busy during the day. I didn't have as much time to think about drinking. But it got where I was just kind of felt like obsessed by drinking. And I was taking a shower one morning, and I said, "God, I'm doing everything I can do." and please help me. And I'm not sure what happened, but it felt like time stood still. I felt like I was rocketed into the fourth dimension. And I don't know how long it lasted, but when it was over, I lost the desire to drink. And for anybody that's new, I want to tell you, stick around till the miracle happens, because it will happen for you. Sometimes it'll take longer, sometimes it'll take shorter. But I was super blessed. I really lost the desire. And I work as a purchasing manager for a resort now, and I order tens of thousands of dollars of alcohol in a week, and I put it away, and I do inventory in a storeroom by myself that has every single type of liquor and wine and beer you can imagine, hundreds of thousands of dollars with it, and I have no desire to drink. The 10th step promises have come true. That alcohol has become neutral. I don't care about it one way or another. To me, it's a liquid in a bottle. But I know for me, it's poison if I drink it. I know I cannot drink it ever safely. And, once I finally was willing to make that surrender, life changed for me. I couldn't quite grasp that. They said, you got to surrender to win. I said, what does that mean? That's stupid. That's crazy. My whole life I've been taught, if you want to win, you got to go get it. You got to take it. You don't surrender. When I finally had that gift of desperation, I surrendered that day in the shower. I finally found out what it was like to win. And I realized that I had to completely give my life to something higher than myself. And I couldn't compartmentalize anything anymore. I couldn't just hold little things back for myself. So once I got the alcohol problem out of the way, I realized that the alcohol was 5% of my problem. And what's up here between my ears is 95% of the problem. And then I said, oh man, I got a lot of work to do. They told me that in the 6th and 7th step, that they only put one paragraph about each in the book, a big book, because if they told you you're going to have to change just about everything about yourself, nobody would want to join AA. But I realized, that's where, the real work has begun, and that's where it continues. And I continue to make progress. I continue to grow. I was very fortunate to have a lot of people that reached out to me and helped me. For a long time, I really resented myself. I had a lot of regrets. I squandered so much money and so much of my life drinking. And I was really blessed when this fellow, Charlie from Boston, he's 85 years old. He's been sober for 40-some years. And after the meeting one day, he came up to me and he said, you know what, man, I hear when you're sharing, you're really hard on yourself. You really got it out for you. And he said, the day you walked through that door, God forgave you. It's about time you start forgiving yourself too. And that really, helped me a lot, and really helped me start turning the leaf. And then, I did the things I was supposed to do. I did everything my sponsor suggested to me, and my life started getting better and better. And it started getting more exciting. I thought, what would I do without alcohol in my life? There won't be anything to do. I'll sit on the porch and in a rocking chair and drink lemonade and wave at people when they walk by. It was like, I had no idea everything I was missing out in my life. I was missing out on everything. And my life has gotten so much better. They said, you can have a life beyond your wildest dreams if you're just willing to do this. And I said, I don't think that's true. I was skeptical. But I'm finding, after 5 years, I'm finding more and more this is coming true. These promises keep coming true, and they keep getting better and better, I was really fortunate to learn how to meditate early on, and that's been a key. I'd say meditation is key. It talks about in the 11th step, it talks about prayer and meditation. And it talks about, upon awakening, we plan our day, we do some prayer, we do some meditation. And what I found out was that I was praying only, I wasn't really meditating. And communication is a two-way street, There's talking and there's listening. So I was doing all the talking, and I wasn't doing any listening. So I started to try to meditate. I did some research on it, saw some different breathing techniques and things to listen to. And so I started getting up in the morning, and I put my pillows up, and I would start meditating, and then I would fall asleep. And so I went to this, my home group was in California, if you can believe that, because this lady who was a vendor of mine for all these years kind of 12-stepped me on a phone call and told me about AA, and she said, oh, our group's online now. So I was doing Zoom meetings in California. And so I went to California to meet all these people in person that I knew from the meetings that I was going to 3 nights a week. And I got to come up to them, sit, and they have a podium every meeting like this, and I got to lead a meeting and meet all these people. And I went on a men's retreat with a bunch of the guys out in the mountains. And this one guy that I really, like, he had, they say you got to have what they want. This guy had what I wanted. He was a really cool guy, and he really had a lot of wisdom and experience. And he said, how's your meditation going, Drew? And I said, well, I keep trying to do it in the morning when I wake up, and I keep falling asleep. And he said, well, what are you doing? Where are you doing your meditation? And I said, well, in my bed. I'm sitting up in my bed. He said, what do you think's going to happen when He said, it does say, it does talk about, upon awakening, it does say God gave us a brain. So he said, why don't you try this? He said, meditation there's not a big secret to it. He said, take your chair out in the grass in the morning before the sun's coming up and sit there for 5 to 10 minutes with your eyes shut, your mouth shut, and don't say a word and just sit there. He said it's the most humbling thing you can do to just be there and not saying anything. And so I did that. When I got back, I did that. I took my chair out there and I sat down and I meditated for about 10 minutes. And when I was done, nothing happened. And I said, okay, well, maybe it'll happen tomorrow. So I did it again the next day, and I did it again the next day. And every day I did it, and every day nothing happened. I said, I think this guy Glenn might be full of something. So you know what happened? But I kept doing it. And then after a couple weeks, all of a sudden I realized that things started slowing down in life for me. I talked about that, how we have to learn to pause when agitated, but we learn to respond instead of react. That started happening for me. And things didn't make me get so heated so quickly. I was able to, I call it carry a big stack of passes in my back pocket. It's an imaginary stack of passes, and I fling them out at people all day long when they aggravate me. But things really started changing. And you know how it talks about in the promises, we'll intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us? That started happening too. I was so confused before I got to AA, and all of a sudden I knew how to handle things. And it just came natural, just like nothing. I said, wow, this is really working, So I've done some other things with my meditation. I've gone to sound baths with Reiki healers. I've been doing that for a few years. And I love it. I think it's fun. I love being sober. I love doing sober stuff, And I've taken some friends to it. It was a little too far out for them. But I like it, man. It's it's the most relaxing hour you can imagine for me. But the sober life just keeps getting better, and it keeps better. And after I was sober about, 10 months, I don't want to go too far about my past or how it was, because we all got our own journey, and it all converges here, right? We all got here in basically the same way, but with different routes. But I did want to tell you about what happened, and I wanted to tell you about how it is now. And after I was sober about 10 months, 11 months, my sponsor said, you got to give it back to someone. You got to find someone to sponsor. And I said, oh man. He said, I don't know if I'm ready to do that. I said, I don't feel like I'm, up to that. I figure I need a couple of years for that. He's like, no, he said, just, the Spirit will guide it to you. Just be open-minded to it. It talks about in the spiritual experience how nothing keeps us in ignorance more than contempt prior to investigation. So I started going to meetings that were near halfway houses. And there's a lot of guys there, and they had to get sponsors. It was like part of the curriculum. And most of them I was just their sponsor in name. So they would get to the fourth step, third step, or fourth step, and then they disappeared on me like ghosts. And I said, man, I think I'm a really bad sponsor. And my percentage is like, if I was in the baseball, I would be like, not even in the minor leagues. And that sponsor said, no, your percentage is 1,000%. You've stayed sober every time, this entire time you're sponsoring people, you're staying sober. So you're 1,000% success rate. And I said, I didn't look at it that way. You know, what I find in AA is that when we change the way, our perspective, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at begin to change. And it's about like that in just about everything in life. So I did finally get some guys that started to make it through the steps, and a few of them have had long-term sobriety. And for me, man, that is the juice for me. It's like seeing people come in beaten up and badly mangled like I was, and then taking them through the steps and seeing the metamorphosis. It's just like the caterpillar to the butterfly. And it's just awesome. And I just think, I mean, there's no better feeling than that, that I can think of. And, it's, and I don't take credit for any of it, because it's not my doing. I learned that I can only control my sobriety. I'm not in control of anyone else's sobriety. I can do everything I can to try to help someone get sober. I can share my experience with them, show them how I did the steps. But at the end of the day, it comes down to that person's choice. It talks about, and there's one of them as Bill sees it, where it talks about prospects, and it says, if you find yourself a horse, you take him the bucket of water, and you say how great this water is. It's got God in it. Your life's going to be better. All you got to do is drink this water, quit drinking beer, and life's going to be better. And it says if the horse wants to drink beer and not the water, then you leave the bucket for the horse and you go find someone else to help. So I learned to just go try to find other people to help when things didn't work out. And I've really been blessed to have a few really good sponsees. I have a sponsor right now. He's the best I've ever had. I thought he was going to speak for the 10-minute spot tonight, but he got to cut a break. So, but he's done everything I asked him to do and everything I suggested, and without most of the time on his own too. So it's nice to have the ones that really want it, because you got to really want this. It's a program of action. It's not given to us, and we have to continue to do this every day. I have to every day pray, meditate. I do some readings. I love the 24-hour-a-day book. That book helped me so much it's a Hazelden Betty Ford book. It's not sanctioned by AA, but it should be, I think. But anyway, it's a great book, and that book helped me a lot with growing my spirituality. And it still does, and I still read it. And there's one in there that's on January 6th, and it says, the decision I made to stop drinking is the most important decision I ever made in my life. Everything I have in my life depends on this decision. My personal relationship with my higher power depends on this. Everything in my life depends on this. And I know I have to practice discipline to keep this gift that God's given me. Because I can't stay sober on my own. This has been a gift from God. But I have to maintain my gift. And I have to do these things daily. And there's no graduation. And there's no finish line. It's a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of our spiritual condition, our daily spiritual condition. So I do these things every day, and I have great days. And there's some days where I rush through my meditation, or I don't have time, I skip it, something comes up. And man, I can tell the difference in my days, that they feel off. I don't feel like I'm on that beam, And I've noticed that as I continue to do these things in my life has become much more leveled out. I don't have these high highs and these low lows. I have waves, I felt like one day in school, like sometime in elementary school, they gave out the directions for life. And that day I was out sick. And I never got those directions. And when I came to AA, I found it gave me a design for life. And I was like, wow, man, I've been looking for this my whole life. And it works especially in tough times. The tougher it is, the better it works. Or it works just as well. It gives me a guide for living my life. And it's been an amazing life. And I know that I could lose it just like that. So I continue to try to give it back. They said, you got to give it away to keep it. I continue to try to do service. I continue to try to help others. I continue to trust God. And I continue to keep my side of the house clean, my side of the street clean. And it's real important to continue to do that daily maintenance. And I found that that 10th step, which is part of our daily maintenance, I don't have to, at the end of the day, I don't find myself doing things where I have to make an amends the next day. Because I don't like making amends. It's not fun. Especially when you go the next day and the person looks like you're crazy. I say, remember yesterday and I got a little heated with you about whatever, and they're like, they completely forgotten about it by then. They're like, this is nuts. But I have to do that stuff because I have to maintain my side of the street, you know. But I've been really blessed with this life. It saved my life, and I can't ever repay it back. The only way I can pay it back is by continuing to help others do it. I know that God saved my life a lot of times. I look back in the rearview mirror of my life. I mean, I had I can count on more than one hand the amount of times I wrapped a car around a tree going 140 miles an hour and almost bled to death from passing out and hitting my chin open. And, you know, there's so many times I know God has been looking out for me. And the whole time I didn't even know it. But now that I know it, you know, I know I gotta take care of that responsibility. And I'm not sure how much time I got left here. 5 minutes? Okay. Well, I know that I think I emphasized that what I thought was really important was about the meditation, the action on the 6 on our character defects. I like to call them shortcomings. It sounds a lot better to me to call them shortcomings. But I know I got to continue to work on those things daily. I think that most of my life I felt like I was driving the wrong way on a highway, going about 90 miles an hour, and I was avoiding the next car crash coming. And since I've been living this way of life that's been taught by AA, I feel like I'm on the right side of the road, and I'm going on cruise control with the speed limit and all the rest of the cars. And I don't have that impending chaos in my life anymore. And it was really weird when I first got rid of chaos in my life because I didn't know what to do with myself. I thought I was bored. I said, what? This is weird, not having problems and issues and troubles. And I said, I got to figure out what is my purpose in life. And I started trying to think a long time, what is my purpose? And I started thinking all these things, what am I going to do this? And then I saw the Dalai Lama on this thing one time, and he said, the purpose of life is to be happy. I said, man, I never thought about that. And then I read this other thing that said, happiness is a byproduct of living a good, virtuous life. I said, wow. I said, what's virtuous mean? And I said, it means being honorable, having good behavior, having good manners, being less self-centered and more God-centered and more other-centered. It means having respect for people and respect for yourself. And I said, I can do those things. And then I started doing those things, and I started enjoying my purpose of life, which is to be happy. And it's an awesome way to live. So I was going to try to wrap it up. This fellow that he's been sober for 60 years. I met him. He got sober when he was 19 years old. I met him in California. He's been sober for 60 years. I don't think I've met anyone that's been sober 60 years. But he would recite this poem whenever he spoke at the end. And my brain is not able to recite it, but I'm going to read it anyway because I thought it was a pretty cool poem. It's called The Auctioneer and the Old Violin. It says, "'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it hardly worth his while to waste his time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. "'What am I bid, good people?' he cried. "'Who starts the bidding for me? $1? $1? Do I hear $2? $2? Who makes it $3? $3 once, $3 twice, going for $3, but no. From the back, from the room far back, a gray bearded man came forward, and picked up the bow. Then wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening up the strings, he played a melody pure and sweet as the angel sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, "What now am I bid for this old violin?" as he held it aloft with its bow. 1,000? 1,000? Do I hear 2? 2,000? Who makes it 3? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, going and gone, said he. The audience cheered, but some of them cried, "We just don't understand. What changed its worth?" Swift came the reply, "The touch of the master's hand." And many a man, with life out of tune, all battered and bruised, with hardship, is auctioned cheap to a thoughtless crowd, much like that old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He is going once, he is going twice, he is going, then almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that is wrought by the touch of the master's hand. Thank you, and have a great evening.